All right, so we are in Parshat Vayigash, in many ways, the emotional climax of Sefer Breshit, or at least the second part of Sefer Breshit, where the Parsha opens with Yehuda's impassioned plea to this Egyptian official after nothing seems to go right with for the brothers.
You want to turn off the overhead?
The goblet was found in Binyamin's sack, which is obviously the worst thing that could have happened from the brothers' perspective after they had all promised their father Yaakov that Binyamin would be returned safely, and now they're literally fleeing for their lives, for the life of Binyamin, for the life of their father. Everything is coming out, and Yosef, we're told, as Yehuda successfully petitions him, Yosef is no longer able to constrain himself to hide his identity, and he reveals himself to the brothers as Yosef. A lot of interesting things to say about the beginning of the parsha, about Yosef's revelation to them, and then he, once he convinces them that it really is him, he says, well, then, come down and join me in Egypt. Go tell our father Yaakov that I'm here, that everything is okay. I'll take care of you. And so that's what happens. And then we have a second reunion with Yosef and Yaakov. Also very emotional, or potentially very emotional, depending on whose lens you read it through. And Yaakov settles his family in Eretz Goshen, in one of the suburbs that Yosef had prepared for them. And it's quite a rich parsha. So I want to focus on one question. No surprises here. Nothing. Just kind of really look at the text and try to build our own case over what did Yaakov know. Right? So imagine the scene. You're Yaakov. You've already lost your favorite son Yosef. And we can spend at least one class, if not many classes, talking about Yaakov in particular, but really all the Avot's parenting styles. But it's no secret, Yosef was his favorite. Yosef is gone. And now the brothers come back from Egypt after their first trip, having gone to get food. And they say, we're not allowed to come back unless Binyamin comes with us. And so he holds out while Shimon is being held in jail.
View later.
While Shimon is being held in jail, he holds out until they really run out of food and have no choice but to go back down to resupply. And they go down, and the brothers come back. And hi, Judy and Gary. We're just setting the scene here.
Hi, thanks.
So the brothers come back, and what do they say to him? They say to him, we have some interesting news for you. Remember that Yosef, who 22 years ago we said, was dead and had been just eaten and devoured by a wild animal? Guess what? He's alive and well, and he's the one who's been causing us all these sorrows in Egypt. And now he wants you to come down and join him. Right? It's a little bit of an awkward conversation, right? Imagine you being in Yaakov's shoes. What do you mean Yosef is alive? You told me he was dead. What's going on here? So the question is, what did Yaakov know? Did he know about what the brothers did to Yosef? Does he ever find out about how Yosef winds up in Egypt? And that's our question. Before we get into any text or any study, the story is familiar to all of us. Anyone have any guesses? Any thoughts on this question?
Oh, it's pretty obvious that he did not know, at least on any kind of conscious level.
Sorry. So when you say it's obvious he did not know, at what point is it obvious he did not know?
Well, just from here.
Okay, so up to the point of being told that Yosef is alive, right, he doesn't know. That's clear. If he knew, then he would have gone down himself, or he would have sent someone to try to find Yosef, right? What about later on? Is this kept a secret from him for his entire life, or does he find out?
Not clear.
Not clear. Anyone else want to
Yeah,
offer some initial thoughts on this?
yeah. The brothers never actually tell him that Joseph is dead. Don't they just show him the torn coat?
Okay, so good. So the brothers don't tell him he's dead. They show him the coat. They soak the coat in blood. They say, Hakerna, Haketonet Bincha, is this Yosef's coat? And right, Yaakov kind of comes to the conclusion of Taruf Taraf Yosef, that the wild animal has devoured him. That's actually our second source. So good. Let's look at that. Source number 2. So this is after the brothers have sold Yosef into slavery. They return to Yaakov. They take the coat, they dip it in blood, they tear it, and they come back to Yaakov and they show him the coat. They say, "We found this." I think I should have included one more pasuk in this source. I'm sorry. They say Hakerna Haketonet bin Chazeh. Is this Yosef's coat? Vayakira, Vayomer Ketonet bini Chayara Achaltuha Tarof Taraf Yosef. He recognizes it and he says, "It is indeed Yosef's coat. A wild animal has devoured him." Vayikra Yaakov simlotav v'yasim sak b'motnav vayitabel al beno yamim rabim. And he puts on mourning sackcloth and clothes of mourning, and he mourns for his son for many days. Vayakumu kol banav v'chol benotav v'nachamo vayima'in lehitnachem vayomer ki yered al bani evel she'ola vayif oto aviv. All of his sons and daughters, and that's another interesting question for a different time, is who are all these? We have many references to Yaakov's daughters, and yet we're only told explicitly of one daughter. Who's that one daughter we're told of?
It's Dinah.
Dinah. We're only told of Dinah, and yet we're told in many occasions that there is benotav. There are many daughters who are involved in the story.
Daughters-in-law, maybe, or granddaughters.
Okay, so that's what Rashi says. Rashi says daughters-in-laws. We're also only told of one granddaughter. Who's the one granddaughter we're told of?
Sarah.
Sarah bat Asher.
Ah, your favorite.
My favorite, yes. So it's statistically quite remarkable, but not unimaginable for one man to have 13 children and only one of them to be a daughter. But once we get to the second generation, or the expanded family, and we're told that there's 70 souls who go down with him to Egypt, for there to be only 2 daughters among the 70 is quite remarkable. Right? That's statistically almost impossible.
They were very religious.
Well, you could be very religious. There's religious women too. There are sources that talk about, and again, not that this is something that we still hold, but there are certainly sources that talk about, sons being preferred for tzaddikim, whatever. So maybe there is something there, but it seems very unlikely that there would only be 2 daughters or 2 females in this entire accounting. But anyway, back to our question. So Yaakov is not comforted, and he says, "I will go down mourning to my son in Sheol." Thus his father bewailed him. He says, "I'm going to be mourning Yosef forever and ever and ever." Okay, so let's just stick with that. There's a Rashi here, which might be a beginning of an intimation to try to answer our question. Rashi says, what does it mean, "Vayima'in lehitnachem," that he refused to be comforted? Ein adam mikabel tanchumim al hachai v'savor shemet. She'al hamet nigzera gzera she'yishakeach min halev v'lo al hachai. he quotes a midrash which says a person does not accept consolation for someone who is living but presumed to be dead. Right? Someone who you think is dead but is in fact living. Because there was a decree made that if someone is in fact dead, they will eventually be forgotten from the heart. I don't think this means that they'll be completely forgotten, but right, as we talked about, there's a healthy way of mourning, and there's a way of moving on, and there's a point, even for for those that we're extremely close to, that the normal course of human psychology and personality is that we eventually are able to move on and not be all consumed with the loss of the loved one.
Excuse me, I've heard people talk about and write about idea of lacking a grave, lacking the demonstrable evidence of death.
Right.
There's a report, there's a story, the ship went down with everybody, the plane was not recovered, there's nobody who could be, but there's no direct evidence. The ritual with burial is interesting. In Israel, it's still with the idea of no casket, with tachrichim wrapped around the body, but the outline is clearly there. It's very blunt as a clear message. You don't have that kind of thing, and there's I think an implication that having that experience of the clear evidence of death, at least physical death, that a healing can begin after that.
Right.
But with is there Shiva when you don't know? Not exactly
the
when or what?
The halacha is that there is Shiva if and when the relatives give up hope of recovering a body.
And Yaakov is refusing to give up hope.
Right.
He's torn apart by that. It makes him, it's painful, and he cultivates the pain. Yeah. Which sounds contradictory, but he's one of the avot.
Yeah.
From the psychological point of view, also, I'd just like to add one other thing that may be of relevance here, and that is that people who have conflicted feelings about what is going on, either with the person who has died or questions about their death, find it very difficult to, this can happen to, unfortunately, to any person. There may be family problems over the years or whatever it is, and it just takes a lot longer to grieve completely.
Right.
And we have here, you've already mentioned before that Yaakov, trying to figure out what was Yaakov doing, sending this young fellow up to be with those big brothers who he knew really were angry with him for so-called tattling on them. What does it mean that Yaakov watched for the fulfillment of the dream? He's got all of this other stuff going on as well. And and some of the, Rashi says he actually did suspect them. And then there'll come a pasuk like that later here, I think, when he's, so there's this undercurrent of conflicting feelings also that I think is really important to acknowledge here.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go back to, just because it'll become relevant as we move on, but kind of said it outside, but I think it's important to see the psukim where the brothers in fact tell Yaakov about Yosef being in Egypt. So after Yosef has revealed himself to the brothers and told them, go fetch Yaakov and bring him back, right? So there's a whole question, well, why doesn't Yosef go and get him himself? Not for tonight, but there's a lot of these details that are quite interesting and can have quite important bearing on how we read the story. So Vaya'alu Mitzrayim, Vayavo Eretz Canaan El Yaakov Aviyah. So they leave Egypt and they come to the land of Canaan, to Yaakov their father. Vayagidu lo leimor, Od Yosef chai v'chihu moshel b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. And they tell him, saying, right? There's a redundancy here. Vayagidu lo le'mor. They tell him, saying, right? They're trying to find the words, trying to find the way in which to break this news to him. So they tell him Yosef, eventually they blurt out, Yosef is alive and he is a ruler over all of Egypt. Vayafag libo kilo ha'emin lahem. His heart stopped, or his heart went numb because he didn't believe them. Right, and so back to Martha, one of my favorite characters. Right, so there's the famous medrash that says that the way that they broke the news to him was they actually recruited Serach bat Asher to kind of sing it to him in a soft way to break the news, right? We think about how we give bad news to people and how we dread having to do that, but there's also an art to delivering good news in a way that you don't want the person to be overcome with emotions and, God forbid, harmed. So his heart is numb, he doesn't believe them. Right, Abrilav et kol divrei Yosef asher diber aleihem. They told him everything that Yosef had instructed them, and he sees the wagons that Yosef sent to bring him, and his spirit is revived. Vayomer Yisrael Rav od Yosef benichai elcha ver'enu b'terem amutin. So Yaakov says, interesting also for a different time, the name changed, but so now he's identified as Yisrael. Says, my son Yosef is indeed still alive. I will go and see him before I die. Okay, so this will become relevant as we move on in the shir, but it was important, I think, to see these words inside. Okay, so what other evidence would we turn to try to address our question of what does Yaakov know, or does Yaakov know? What does he think happened? So there's sources that we're going to look at before the revelation, before he finds out that Yosef is alive, and then there's going to be sources afterwards. So before Yaakov finds out that Yosef is alive in Egypt, anything that jumps to your mind as far as supportive one way or another as to whether Yaakov had any idea about what the brothers did to him? So there's all sorts of midrashim that I didn't bring here, but Anne alluded to. There's all sorts of midrashim that talk about when the brothers went down to Egypt, they were kind of on the lookout for Yosef. Some of those midrashim say it was on Yaakov's instructions, and some say it was on their own. But we have, certainly in the rabbinic literature, a sense that the brothers had, perhaps driven by Yaakov, that they should be on the lookout for Yosef when they go down to Egypt, which makes it all the more remarkable that they didn't recognize him when he was, in the first encounters with him. That they were told specifically, look for this man, look for your brother, and they weren't. It was literally right in front of their face, eating with them. They didn't recognize him. But what comes to mind for me is the way in which Yaakov describes the reluctance or refusal to send Binyamin with the brothers. So let's go to source number 3. So this is the first time, right, as the famine takes over the land. Vayar Yaakov ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim. Vayomer Yaakov levanav lama titra'u. Vayomer kine shamati ki shever b'Mitzrayim redu shama v'shivu lanu misham v'nichya v'lo namut. So Yaakov hears, he sees, somehow he knows that there is food in Egypt. And he tells his sons, why are you titra'u? Why are you looking at one another, right? Trying to figure out how we're going to get food. Go get food in Egypt. Vayerdu achei Yosef asara lishbor bar b'Mitzrayim. So 10 of Yosef's brothers go down to get food in Egypt, right? And at this point, right, the Torah consciously tells us that it's achei Yosef, that the primary relationship being stressed is as the brothers of Yosef. 10 of them go down to Egypt. Binyamin achi Yosef lo shalach Yaakov et et achav ki amar pen yikra'enu aso. And Benjamin, the brother of Yosef, you could say the real brother of Yosef, Yaakov did not send because he says, I'm afraid that something might happen to him on the way. So Yaakov has some unconscious feeling that maybe it's not a great idea to send Binyamin with the 10 other brothers. Again, it could be just one bad thing happened to Yosef. I don't want anything bad, and going on the road is inherently a dangerous proposition. But it could be that there's some inkling of suspicion he has of the brothers as well. When we move along, and after they were in Egypt and have this encounter where they're accused of being spies, and Shimon is held in prison, and they come back, and they're told you can't come back again unless you bring your younger brother with you. So they come back to Yaakov and they report everything that happened while they were in Egypt. And so they tell Yaakov, we were accused of being spies. We told them we're not spies. We were 12 sons of one man. One of them is no longer around, and the smaller one is home with our father in Canaan. Vayomer Elenu ha'ish adoni haaretz b'zot eda ki chinimatem achichem echad hilichu iti ve'et ra'avon batechem ketchu v'alechu. So this is the only way that you can prove yourselves to not be spies. One of you will stay behind as a prisoner, and the rest of you can go back and bring food to your family. In return, haviu et achichem hakaton elai ve'eda ki lo meragli matem ki chinimatem et achichem etin lachem ve'et haaretz tisachru. Right, and bring your younger brother, and then I'll know that you're not spies and that you really are speaking the truth. And I'll release Shimon, and everyone and you can continue to buy food for me. So they're unpacking their bags. And they find that their money has been returned to them, and they're now very afraid. Vayomer lehem Yaakov avihem. Otishi kaltem Yosef enenu v'Shimon enenu et Binyamin tikachu alai hayuku kulana. Yosef is already gone. Shimon is now being held in jail, and now you also want to take Binyamin, right? So Yaakov, again, not that he's outright accusing them, but he seems to maybe be connecting the dots a little bit. Every time you guys go off, something bad happens to one of the brothers. Vayomer Reuven el aviv le'mor et shnei vanai tamit im lo avienu elecha tna oto al yadi v'ani ashivenu elecha. So Reuven says, I promise you, I swear to you, if anything happens, you can take my 2 sons and kill them. Vayomer lo yered b'ni imachem ki achiv meit v'hu levado nishar u'pra'u asom b'derech asher telchu ba v'radatem et tzivati b'yagon she'ola. Yaakov says, absolutely not. My son will not go down with you, because his brother is already dead and he alone remains, and something bad will happen to him on the road. Okay, so Yaakov seems to very emphatically deny their request. And interestingly, I think we pointed this out many times, they wind up leaving Shimon in an Egyptian jail for an extended period of time because of Yaakov's reluctance to allow Binyamin to go down with them, which is quite an interesting thing to think about. But then in the next parak we read, Harav kaved ba'aretz, the famine becomes very severe, and all the food runs out. And Yaakov says, we have no choice. You have to go and to Egypt to get more food. Vayomer elav Yehuda leimor, ha'eta id banu ha'ish leimor, lo tiru panai bilti achichem ha'itchem. Yehuda reminds him, we can't go down if we don't bring Binyamin with us. The only way we can go down is if we bring him with us. If you don't let Binyamin go, we are not going either. Because we were told explicitly, don't come back to me unless your brother is with me. Vayomer Yisrael. So again, we have the name change. Lama hariotem li lahagid la'ish ha'od lachem ach. Why did you bring this evil upon me? Why did you have to tell him that you have another brother? He didn't need to know that piece of information. Vayomru sha'osh ta'ala ish lanu u'lemor ladatenu le'mor ha'od avichem chai ויש לכם אח, ונגיד לו על פי הדברים האלה, הידוע נדע כי אמר הורידו באחיכם? So, well, we were asked explicit questions. There's no way we could have known that the follow-up to that would be, bring your younger brother with you. Right? We were answering innocently. Vayomer Yehuda el Yisrael Aviv, shtilcha hanar itiv nakuma v'neilecha, v'nichyev v'lo namut, gam anachnu, gam ata, gam tapenu. Yehuda says, I'm going to take responsibility. Anochi arvenu miyadi tifakshenu, im lo heviatav nilecha v'hitzagti lefanecha v'chatati lecha kol yamim. I will take personal responsibility, and you can, if anything happens to him, you'll demand justice from me for it. We've already delayed, we have to go back. And so Yaakov finally agrees. And at the very end of this exchange, right, he says, bring gifts, bring money, bring extra money. Take your brother and go back to this man. El Shaddai yitin lachem rachamim lifnei ha'ish v'shilach lachem et achichem acher ve'et Binyamin. God will have mercy upon you with this man, and he will release Shimon and Binyamin. V'ani kasher shakolti shakalti. And as for me, if I am to be bereaved, I shall be bereaved. Right? I have no choice in the matter. I really don't want it to be this way, but I really have no choice. Okay, so those are our pre-revelation sources that intimate that maybe Yaakov has some sense that something was happening, some sense that the brothers weren't acting yashar, weren't acting completely innocently. We don't have to read it that way, but that is one way it can be read. And any thoughts or questions on what we've seen so far? No, we hear you.
I'm just wondering why 10 of the brothers went down to Egypt anyway. Wouldn't it have been more circumspect to maybe send half of them and with some servants if they had to schlep a lot of stuff back with them? I don't know. I mean, it sounds like since they had money at their disposal, it seems like, and also, I mean, if they were starving to death, would they have had almonds and pistachio nuts and honey? And is that,
right?
What is ladanum? Is that like laudanum from poppy seeds?
I don't know.
From poppies? It's was used as a drug, actually. What is
That'd
it?
be an interesting gift to give.
Yeah, really. It's what they used before they had anesthesia. Laudanum. It would knock people out so they could undergo treatments if they needed surgery.
Interesting.
That kind of thing.
Interesting.
And
yeah,
the
it's
use
a
of
great question. Why 10
all of
brothers
them
had to go? Why they all have to go?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
And the use of El Shaddai here is also interesting to me. I seem to remember that El Shaddai is God who has everything. El Shaddai Lo, God of who has. It's not the God of mercy or the God of justice, but the God who dispenses so that human beings can live.
Yeah,
Is that
interesting.
wrong?
Interesting. I didn't look into that piece of it. It's a great observation. Certainly in the arc of Yaakov's life, he uses that specific name for God many times in many significant occasions. But I don't have much to say about the significance of it now. I agree there probably is significance to it, though.
I had one other question that's bothered me a long time. Maybe somebody could give me an answer for it tonight. If we think that Yosef is trying to replicate the problem that the brothers had with him, it makes sense for him to say, I will believe you are not spies if you bring me that other brother. But if a person is thinking in just, okay, you've got spies in front of you, and I don't know if you like spy movies or spy novels or things like that. But if a person thinks they have a spy in front of them, what would they need to have to prove that they weren't spies? How does that other brother come into the picture then? I've never understood how that the bringing of that other brother would prove that they were not spies. They could still be spies and bring the brother. I don't know. That is the only place in this most marvelous of first short stories, really, in the genre. The plot is so tight. It's so beautiful. All the things that are going on. But I've never been able really to understand that point. Why?
Anyone have any thoughts to Anne's question?
You know, it's a way of getting them to bring Benjamin down.
Well, of course, but from Joseph's perspective, but from their perspective, or from the perspective of anybody who's in the spy business, why would that prove that they weren't spies?
Right. Why not just hire some stranger off the street to act as your brother? It's a good question. I don't know. Certainly there's no other way of confirming the story. Maybe there was a hope or an expectation that there'd be some family resemblance, but I don't know. It's a good question. It's a good question. I also just wonder what exactly are they spying? What information are they stealing from Egypt? But anyway, so those are our pre-revelation sources that might be of significance. And now let's look at some post-revelation. So this is after Yosef has revealed himself, after he's been reunited. I think the strongest source to answer our question is number 6.
The Soviet Union simply used the word spy willy-nilly for people that they say captured, whatever, over many years.
No, but they never gave them trials.
No, but they used the term spy.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true, they did.
Yeah, but I mean, like, we have the use of spies in, later on in Chumash, when Moshe sends the spies to the land, and they're clearly on an information gathering mission. And Yeshua sends the spies to Yericho. Right? We have spies who are out to get information. I wonder what information Yosef thought or accused them of trying to steal.
He didn't have to be that specific. All he
right,
had to do.
Right.
It's an allegation.
Okay. Fine. So number 6. So this is a source that is at the very end of Sefer Breshit. We'll learn it. We'll read it next week in Shul. This is after Yaakov has died, and the brothers have buried him. So remember, he dies in Egypt. There's an extended mourning period for him in Egypt, in which his body is embalmed or mummified, and they follow the Egyptian mourning rites, it seems. And after that extended mourning in Egypt, Yosef gets permission to go and bury Yaakov back in Eretz Canaan in Marat HaMachpelah, in the family burial, the family cemetery. So as they're returning from having buried Yaakov, the brothers come to Yosef, right? First they consult among themselves. Vayir'u achei Yosef ki met avihem, vayomru lo yishmetanu Yosef hashiv yashivanu et kol hara'a asher gamalnu oto. Okay, Yaakov is now dead. There's no reason for Yosef to wear a pretty face anymore, right? Maybe while Yaakov was alive, he had to put on the air of everything being fine and dandy with the family. But now that Yaakov has died, we're afraid that he's going to get revenge against us, because we treated him pretty awfully. Vayitzavu el Yosef lemor, avicha tziva lifnei moto lemor, ko tomu leYosef, ana sana pesha achecha, v'chatatam ki ra'a gemalucha v'ata sana lepesha avdei elokei avicha v'yef Yosef v'dabram elav. So they come to Yosef and they say to him, this is what your father has commanded before he died. You should tell Yosef to forgive the sin of your brothers against you. Even though they treated you poorly, you should forgive them and in the face of God. Vayef Yosef v'dabram elav. Yosef cries as they say this to him. Vayelchu gam echav vayipu lefanav vayomru hinenu lecha la'avadim. Until his brothers bow before him and they say, we are servants to you. We are prepared to be your slaves.
All right. Well, the Bible never records Yaakov saying this. Only the brothers. To me, it sounds very suspicious.
Okay. So on the one hand, we have a clear verse that says, Yaakov told the brothers, I know what you did to Yosef, and I want him to forgive you. But we have no evidence of that interchange between Yaakov and the brothers. So did this really take place, or is this the brothers making it up in order to preempt anything bad that Yosef might do to them?
And this assumes that Yosef knew what Yaakov knew what the brothers had done.
Right.
But they had never told him that, presumably.
Right. We have no evidence of them having told him, but we do have this verse. So.
But it says that your brothers who treated you so harshly. Where else would we heard that Yaakov knew that?
Okay, so we don't. Again, the Torah does not necessarily record every conversation that took place, right, over the course of their lives. So it is quite possible that such a conversation did happen. We have no evidence of it, and so that's the question: did this in fact happen or not?
Why would the brothers have said that to their father?
Why would they have? Maybe they assumed that the father knew.
Well,
right?
I mean,
at some point, either when they come to him the first time and say Yosef is alive in Egypt, he says, "How could that be? Yosef's been dead. Yosef I thought was dead." Maybe they would have confessed then. But you're right. We don't know. We don't have any evidence one way or the other.
Well, my dissertation was actually on all the communications. There's 268 of them where messages happen in the Torah. And if we come, this is one of the ones I picked out to do a chapter on because it is so very interesting. There are lots of other examples, certainly, when what is to be said to the person is not given right at the beginning. One of the most famous ones is in the story of the plagues in Exodus. All of a sudden, Moshe comes and says something to Paro, and there are some other examples too. As you say, we don't expect every conversation to be there, and so also a person is talking about message communication. There doesn't have to be every single stage of the message communication written down either, Mm-hmm. But in most other examples, there's a sense of another narrator kind of filling into the audience about what is about to happen.
Yeah. This
one we don't. This really stands out by comparison with all of the other examples for that reason alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very big one. Yeah.
It's either possible that the brothers lied, or it's utterly impossible the brothers lied. Take your choice.
Yeah. So if we quickly turn to Rashi on this, source number 10, I wanted to try to separate out the psukim from the commentators so we can get from a more, back to a few weeks ago, more pshat Torah pure perspective. But if we look at Rashi, Avicha tziva, your father commanded. Also, right? Why do they say Avicha, not Avinu? Very strange language. Mm-hmm. Your father, not our father. But Avicha tziva, shinu badavar mipnei hashalom. So Rashi says they altered the facts in order to maintain peace. Kilo tziva Yaakov, kilo nechshad Yosef beinav. because Yaakov never commanded this, because Joseph was not suspect in his sight, right? So Rashi still leaves the possibility that Yaakov knew what the brothers did, but he would never accuse or suspect Yosef of sinking down to their level. Yosef would never exact revenge, even if Yaakov knows how badly the brothers had treated him, he never would have suspected Yosef. But right, he says that the brothers made this up. Right, so then another great evidence that this is never happened is from the Baal HaTurim, who points out, well, then this is the next source. So flip the page. If Yaakov really thought this, why would he not have told Yosef directly? Yosef, don't do harm to your brothers after I die. Why would he have sent the message to the brothers who already don't treat Yosef nicely? Right, so it seems that this maybe this was a fabricated report that the brothers gave. We're quickly running out of time, so let's just go back. Source number 7. In 2 of the brachot that Yaakov gives to his children at the end of his life on his deathbed, there seems to maybe be reference to Nechiras Yosef, to the sale of Yosef, in the bracha that he gives to Shimon and the bracha that he gives to Yehuda. Shimon v'Levi achim klei chamas mecharotehem. Shimon and Levi are brothers, and they are destructive tools of lawlessness. Bistom al tavo, bisodam al tavo nafshi, bikalam al tachar kodi, ki be'apam hargu ish v'yitzonam ikru shor. So we read this and assume that this is referring to what they did to the city of Shechem. However, Yaakov also says about them, ikru uv'yitzonam ikru shor. When pleased, they maim oxen. So Rashi, again, you have to turn the page. Rashi says that ikru shor refers to Yosef. So that Yaakov knew specifically what they did to Yosef, and there was referencing that in this bracha or curse, whatever we want to read it as. And then also with his bracha to Yehuda, Gur Aryeh Yehuda miteref b'nei alita kara ravatzka Aryeh chulavi miyikumenu. Judah is a lion's whelp. Oh, pray, my son, have you grown? He crouches, lies like a lion, like the king of beasts who dares rouse him. So the verb he uses is miteref bani alita, which should remind us of what Yaakov says when he sees Yosef's coat, Harof taraf Yosef. Yosef has been torn apart. So Rashi also sees there an allusion to what the brothers did to Yosef and assumes that Yaakov knew about it, even if he doesn't say anything explicitly to anyone about it. Okay. So now back, let's close out with a couple more Mefarshim. I think the most remarkable one is this Psikta. The Psikta Rabati, source number 9, says, we'll just look at the English. Says basically, Yosef was concerned. Yosef didn't want to speak poorly about his brothers. Once he was reunited with his father, once Yaakov comes down to Egypt, Yosef was concerned either that Yaakov might ask him what happened, how did you wind up here, or that Yosef's emotions would get the best of him. And so he was concerned he didn't want to bring any pain to Yaakov. So what did Yosef do to ensure he would never be able to tell Yaakov what the brothers did to him? The entire time they were reunited in Egypt, Yosef was never alone with Yaakov. That's what the Psikta says. He did not enter into him all the time, such that they were not that they all came. It's to inform you of his righteousness. He did not want to be alone with his father, lest he say to him, "How did your brothers act with you?" And then he would curse them. Hence, he did not go to his father all the time. Okay, so really radical way of addressing our question is the Psikta says the extremes that Yosef went to. The Ramban also, if we go up one source, in source number 8, tells us Yerli al derech hapshat shelo hugad liYaakov kol yamav ki achiv machu et Yosef aval chashav ki chayato ebasadeh v'motzim oto lekachuhu machu oto el mitrim. So in Yaakov's entire life, no one told him that the brothers had sold Yosef, Rather, he thought that he got lost in the field on his way to go check in on them, and someone else kidnapped him or took him. Maybe he was in fact attacked by an animal and injured, but that no one ever told him. Both the brothers and Yosef had this, unclear if it was even a spoken agreement or they just all intuited on their own not to say anything to Yaakov.
Where and when was the Besikta?
Where and when was the Besikta? I don't know the exact answer to that. I mean, it's a medrash halacha. It's a medrash. There's different theories as to where and when. Some say it's a very early, and some say it's a very late.
One other thing about Yosef never being alone with Yaakov.
Mm-hmm.
He's viceroy of Egypt. When would he have found the time?
Okay, well, yes, but I mean, even I think Paro had time with his family.
Well,
right. There are times when even high-ranking officials get some downtime. So yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, finally, let's look. We have two sources, Sefer HaChasidim and Brit Olam, which is both by the same author. So the Sefer HaChasidim tells us, Kach Amar, Ilu lo na'aseh tova, hayitem tzrichim mechila. Aval, kevan shelokim chashva letova lachem, letova lachem v'li, harei mimeni einchem tzrichim mechila. So the Sefer Hasidim imagines a conversation between Yosef and his brothers, where Yosef tells them, if nothing good came out of what you did to me, then you would indeed have to ask for my forgiveness. But since the end result, ultimately, everything turned out for the best, right? It was for the best that I was sold, and however I rose to power in Egypt, was able to rise to power to provide food and save the family from starvation. Since it turned out to be good for you and for me, you no longer have to ask my forgiveness, right? Circumstances work themselves out. Hashem worked it out. Whatever the case may be, you're not chayav. You're not guilty. You're no longer guilty of having done harm to me. Or if you are guilty, it's been forgiven. Aval in HaKadosh Baruch Hu atem tzrichim mechila. Mi sheyachshov ra'a af al pi shletova nehepach. But right, you do need to ask forgiveness from God. You still acted wrongly. What you did was a horrible thing to do. And even if you don't need to ask my forgiveness, because in the end, maybe I suffered for many years in between, but in the end, everything turned out okay for me. You still have a religious obligation to ask forgiveness from God. You've still committed an objective sin. And he makes the same point in the final source. Yesh laha'ir de'im kvar machal lahem Yosef eich amru razal bezorah chadash tegalut mitzrayim haya ba'avor chet mechilat Yosef v'gam gzerat haman amru b'midrash rabba shehi b'chet mechilat Yosef ayin sham v'ad achavon asaru asara harugi malchut ba'al mikoach asara shvatim v'kilu onsham. Right, we have many things in the course of Jewish history that are attributed to the sale of Yosef, right? There's sources that say that the entire slavery and servitude and exile in Egypt was a result of the sale of Yosef. There's sources that say that when Haman rose to power against the Jews in the time of Purim, that was because of the sale of Yosef. And we have sources that I believe we studied together about the Asar Haruge Malchut, the 10 rabbinic martyrs whom we eulogize on Yom Kippur and on Tisha B'Av, right? That the Medrash tells us that was also a result of the sale of Yosef, right? It says, the story tells us that the rabbis were consulting and they heard that the Jews are deserving punishment in exile for the sale of Yosef. The ruler who rises against them says you were never punished, you never gave judgment for having sold Yosef, and so one of the Rabbi Yishmael, who is the Kohen Gadol, goes up to Shemayim and he hears one of the angels declaring behind the veil of God's throne, that indeed the tribes are guilty, and so they accept the punishment upon themselves, and that's one rabbinic martyr for each tribe. So the question that he asks is, well, if Yosef forgave the brothers, how could they have been deserving? How could all of these horrible things be the result of the sale of Yosef? And so he answers the same thing that he said previously: Nira deshvatim chatu b'shtayim, chatu im Yosef v'chatu im Hashem. In the Mechilat Yosef, they committed two sins. They committed a sin against Joseph, and they committed a sin against Hashem. And they, even if Yosef forgave them for the sin that they committed against him, he had no way. It wasn't his place to forgive them for the religious sin against Hashem that they had also committed. And that's how we can still be deserving of all these horrible punishments as a result of the sale of Yosef. So back to our question: did Yaakov know about the sale of Yosef, or did he live his life? It's hard to say he lived it in the bliss of ignorance, because as he tells Paro, I'm very old and I've had a difficult life. Right? We can't say that he was ignorant of all that was going on, but maybe on this one detail he was ignorant. Anyone convinced one way or the other?
It occurred to me tonight when we were reading about Yosef crying when the brothers came to him with this false message, that, well, this is just speculation, of course. I don't know. I mean, the most important thing are the words that a person says after they cry. It's very important to listen always, because you never know what's going to come out. Right. But he could have been crying because he had tried so hard for his father not to know, that he himself was still trying to honor his father and keep him from any further grief. And to hear them use that as an excuse for asking him to forgive them hurt him that much more, that here his brothers were casting aspersions on their father in a way, and that his father had suffered so much more even from knowing this. At least he was hoping to spare him that. That was
or to jump off on that even more, maybe he's also upset that he couldn't, all these years he couldn't have an honest conversation with his father.
Yes,
he was on eggshells trying to keep the secret. If he knew, then I could have opened up. I could have had a real connection. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. There is no sin recorded here against Yaakov.
Right. That
why not?
Certainly, that certainly should be included, we would think. Interesting. All right, so I'm not sure that there is a correct answer to this question. I mean, presumably there was, Yaakov knew or didn't know. I'm not sure where we have the tools or the wherewithal to get to that factual level of facts.
Well, some of the quotations say effectively that he knew those sons, and he kind of knew that they weren't so straight up with him. Right.
So, but again, there's other incidents in their lives he could have been referencing. Right. If you want to maintain the position that he didn't know and no one told him, you can certainly read. You don't need to read his curse of Shimon and Levi as Rashi does with that reference to Yosef. Or you could even read it with reference to Yosef, that he knows that they were jealous of him, that they treated him not nicely, without knowing about this ultimate sin that they committed against him. But you're right, he certainly was aware enough of his sons to know that they weren't all little angels, and that they were complex characters who had flaws. He called them out on their flaws. And so it is quite possible with that understanding that he did have an awareness that what they did to Yosef and that they did sell him, or it's possible not. And just one more wrench in this whole question is there is a position, I think we spoke about it last year maybe, the position of the Rashbam and others who say that the brothers actually never did sell Yosef, that they put him in the pit and they were trying to decide what to do with him. And then these Yishmaelim, these traveling merchants, passed by and found Yosef and took him before the brothers had reached a decision.
Well, that's what the plain text says. It's been a bug under my bonnet for years. Why they could say that the brothers sold Yosef? They never got any money.
So it's unclear. They do agree that they're going to sell him.
Yeah.
So it's not clear, but there certainly is. There's a significant school of Mefarshim that say that the brothers never, that they actually never were the ones who sold him, that he was taken before they could spring to action on their plan. One more wrench in this question, in this whole episode, and this really deserves maybe, we'll find occasion in a different year to go into depth, but there is a radical position of Yoel ben Nun, leading rabbi in Israel, who, in answer to another big question on this whole episode, the question of why did Yosef, in all his years in Pharaoh in Egypt, not reach out to his father, not reach out to the family? Why did he wait for them to come find him? And so Rav Yoel ben Nun offers the thesis, the theory, that Yosef thought maybe his father was involved in what happened to him.
Interesting.
Right? Why his father sends him to the field, to the brothers whom we already know don't like Yosef. So Yosef thought maybe Yaakov was in on this whole plot, and maybe he doesn't want me either. So that's another wrench in this whole thing.
Which is the better behavior, though, to hold his tongue, not to say something because he knows, at least at minimum, he knows anything he says regarding the circumstances of why he was missing for 20 years or whatever the number is, makes for something explosive. He has grounds to kill his brothers just for having put him into a hole in the ground with scorpions and snakes and whatever, and then going away and leaving him there without any nobody said anything, presumably, just stay tight here and a couple hours, I'll be back.
Yeah.
No one said anything like that. No one gave him any hope. And instead of exploding, he kept the rage under control, locked away, not to be said. Shmirat lashon, because the power of the mouth is very great. What is it? Yaakov is compared to, was it Tolat Yaakov? Like a worm, having no real power because there are no legs, there are no arms, but kol kocho, as Rashi puts it, kol kocho b'fiv. All of his strength is in his mouth. With a few words, you can destroy a relationship, a reputation, a marriage, other things. And Yosef decides better to remain shtum.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question, and that's part of what's such a big struggle with this is what's better? Is it better to hold your tongue and, quote, not cause any more pain to your father? Would it have been more cathartic to come out and say this is what happened and maybe allow for real healing in the family? As we just said, to have this, to always be on guard, to not let the secret slip. Does that mean that they really didn't have a real relationship for all those years in Egypt when they could have? I don't know what's better. I don't know. But this is why it's such an important question, and why it's okay to not have the answer to it, right? That we can raise all these issues and see the merit in both sides of it. I'm not sure. We're after 9 o'clock, so we'll take one more quick comment, and then we're going to have to sign off. Go ahead.
My feeling is that Yaakov has to suspect, more than suspect, knowing that the apples do not fall far from the tree. He tricked his father into thinking he was his brother Esav. His wives tricked him into, so yeah, Yosef has it, and Leah's sons have it from both sides, from both parents, this idea of trickery. And Lavan is certainly a trickster and a con artist in his own way. So, you know, there's a strong family predisposition to this sort of behavior.
Right, for sure. And I think we're trained to think that, right, each generation overcomes it, and not necessarily the case. That this continues. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank
it was
you.
great to learn together.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you, Rabbi.
see you soon.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Bye.
Erev Tov.
Erev Tov.
Erev Tov.